Welcome, curious minds, to the Deep Dive. This is where we plunge into complex topics, unpack them piece by piece, and help you get genuinely well-informed fast. Today, we're diving straight into the beating heart of American democracy, Congress.
Right into it.
You, our dedicated listener, sent us a truly invaluable stack of materials and official record directly from the House of Representatives,
Yeah, that's great stuff.
detailing their intense discussions and incredibly close votes from just earlier this week, specifically Wednesday, July 2, 2025. It's a remarkable snapshot of democracy in full, vibrant, and often contentious action.
And our mission for this deep dive is to act as your expert guides through this rich congressional record. Our goal is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, helping you understand not just what happened on that pivotal day, but critically, why it matters so profoundly.
Yes, the why.
And how these decisions, forged in the very halls of power, could ripple out and affect your everyday life and even your future. It's about moving beyond the headlines to the true substance.
Absolutely. And at the epicenter of all this legislative drama was a single massive piece of legislation, a bill that, as we quickly discovered, had a serious identity crisis, depending on who you asked.
Oh yeah, two completely different takes.
Its fervent supporters proudly championed it as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act.
That was their name for it.
Meanwhile, its equally passionate opponents had a starkly different, far less flattering name for it, the One Big Ugly Bill, with some even bluntly calling it a steaming pile of crap.
Yeah, they didn't mince words.
So we're going to dive deep into these starkly differing viewpoints, explore the very specific changes this proposed bill aimed to bring about, and ultimately try to understand why it generated such intense reactions. Okay, let's unpack this. Our journey begins inside the House chamber on Wednesday, July 2, 2025. The session kicked off bright and early at 9 a.m.
9 sharp.
with Mr. Simpson leading the proceedings as the Speaker pro tempore. Just imagine the controlled chaos, members filing in, pages rushing, staff quietly taking their places.
Yeah, that morning buzz.
All getting ready for a legislative day that, as the record clearly shows, was destined to be anything but ordinary. It sets a scene, doesn't it?
It truly does.
Yeah.
What's particularly noteworthy here is that on this specific day, the Senate was not in session,
Oh, interesting. So just the House.
just the House. So all the intense debate, all the procedural maneuvers, all the votes we're about to delve into were concentrated entirely within the House of Representatives.
Wow.
This truly made the House the singular focal point of federal legislative activity for that entire day, giving its decisions an even greater weight and immediate impact.
And boy, did those debates unfold. The congressional record is packed with spirited discussions, including something called points of order.
Ah, yes, the points of order.
Now, for listeners who aren't constantly watching C-SPAN, this can seem like obscure procedural jargon. But how significant is it when a member raises a point of order, especially one that challenges the bill based on something as specific as Section 426A of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974? Is that just a parliamentary tactic, or does it signal something deeper about the bill's fundamental issues?
That's a fantastic question because it's rarely just a tactic. I mean, it can be used to slow things down or make a political statement, sure.
Okay.
But citing a specific section like 4206, which for our listeners often relates to things like unfunded mandates or spending that doesn't follow established budget rules, that's a serious challenge.
So it's like a formal objection.
Exactly. Think of it like a referee in a major sporting event blowing the whistle, not just for a minor foul, but to consult a crucial part of the rule book. Questioning the very legitimacy of a play that could fundamentally alter the game. It forces everyone to confront whether the legislative process itself is adhering to its own fundamental rules.
Okay, so this wasn't just a minor thing.
No, in this case, it flagged a significant budgetary concern, suggesting the bill might be fiscally irresponsible or, circumventing established financial guardrails. It adds a layer of formal objection that goes beyond simple policy disagreement.
That distinction is crucial. It's not just a debate about policy, but about procedure and fundamental legislative integrity.
Precisely.
And speaking of procedural mechanisms, the record also highlights something called the Speaker's timeout authority. What exactly does that entail, and why does it make House leadership so cautious, as you mentioned, about when they choose to bring controversial legislation to the floor?
The timeout authority. It's indeed a powerful yet double-edged sword for leadership.
So,
Essentially, it means that once a debate on a bill officially begins, and that legislative clock starts ticking, the House leadership has to bring it to a vote.
Oh, wow. No turning back?
Pretty much. There's no easy way to just table it indefinitely or pull it back from the floor if they suddenly realize they don't have enough support to pass it.
That creates huge pressure.
Immense pressure. Imagine a chess player who, once they move a piece, must follow through with the consequences, even if they see a fatal flaw. This rule makes leadership incredibly strategic and careful about when they introduce highly controversial legislation. They need to be absolutely certain they have the votes lined up.
Because once it starts.
Because once that debate commences, the risk of an embarrassing public defeat or a bill dying on the floor becomes a very real and politically damaging possibility. It's a key factor in the high-stakes dance of legislative strategy.
Right. And despite all the procedural maneuvers, the deep dives into the rule book, and the intense back and forth, the bill eventually went to a vote, roll number 190.
Yep, 190.
The outcome, as noted in the record, was incredibly close. 218 ayes to 214 noes.
Razor thin, just 4 votes.
That's a mere 4-vote difference, showing just how finely balanced, how fiercely contested, and how high stakes this decision truly was for both sides.
Absolutely.
After the debate on July 2nd and the subsequent vote, the House then adjourned at 2:33 p.m. on July 3rd, after what must have been an exhausting and pivotal legislative day.
A very long day, stretching into the next.
It truly underlines the razor-thin margins by which major policy can pass or fail in Washington. With the intense procedural battles behind them, the stage was indeed set for the heart of the matter. The passionate arguments for and against H.R. 1.
Yes, the substance of it.
Let's start with those who championed it, proudly dubbing it the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Their vision for this legislation was nothing short of transformative, promising a suite of benefits designed to resonate directly with the everyday American. What were those core promises they put forward?
They absolutely framed this bill as a direct response to what they perceived as a clear mandate from voters in the November election.
Okay, we won. This is what people asked for.
Pretty much. Reflecting the choice Americans made for Republicans to lead, their argument was that this bill delivered on those promises. First and foremost, they emphasized what they called massive tax cuts for many.
The tax cuts, always a big one.
Oh, yeah. They described it as nothing less than the largest tax cut for working families, farmers, and small businesses in U.S. history.
Wow, that's a bold claim.
Very bold. And this wasn't just about abstract numbers. They got very specific about the tangible impact.
And when you say specific, they really pulled out examples that you and I could connect with, right? They painted a picture of direct, noticeable financial relief.
Precisely. To put it into perspective, they claimed households earning under $100,000 could apparently see a significant 12% tax cut.
12%, that's noticeable.
Right. The average family of 4, they argued, might find nearly $11,000 more in their pockets each year.
Almost $11,000.
And for individual workers, they projected real wages could rise by as much as $7,200 annually. They provided vivid, relatable examples to illustrate this. A waitress working for tips, they claimed, could keep an extra $1,300.
Okay.
And a lineman working overtime after a storm could keep an additional $1,400. The entire thrust was that this bill delivers much-needed, direct financial relief to hardworking taxpayers.
So stimulating the economy from the bottom up, kind of?
That was the argument. Empowering individuals with more disposable income. It's a classic argument for broad-based tax relief.
And it wasn't just about putting more money directly in people's pockets. Supporters also pitched this as a crucial step towards restoring fiscal responsibility.
Ah, yes, fiscal sanity.
They claimed it would restore fiscal sanity by cutting almost $2 trillion in federal spending.
$2 trillion. That's a huge number.
And aggressively eliminating what they termed waste, fraud, and abuse from various government programs.
The classic targets.
It was framed as a necessary and long overdue correction to what they frequently described as unchecked government spending that was ballooning the national debt.
Absolutely. Tied directly into that was a strong America First agenda.
Okay, what did that involve in this bill?
Proponents argued the bill would bolster domestic energy production significantly.
More drilling, more mining.
Basically, yes. Which they asserted would lead to lower gas prices for everyday families.
The gas price argument.
Yeah.
Always relevant.
And they made a clear distinction, contrasting the concern of a billionaire who might barely notice fluctuations at the gas pump.
Right.
With that of, say, that waitress making $32,000 a year for whom every dollar saved on gas truly matters and makes a difference in her budget.
Makes sense.
The core argument was that this bill would ensure American workers produce American energy, freeing the nation from what they viewed as unreliable and costly reliance on foreign sources.
So energy independence as well.
Strengthening both national security and economic independence, that was the pitch.
And beyond the economy and energy, they also asserted it would lead to a stronger military.
Yeah, that came up too.
One supporter explicitly warned that failure to pass this bill would kneecap the capabilities and readiness of the nation's military.
Strong language. Kneecap.
Implying that H.R. 1 was not just beneficial, but vital for national defense and readiness in an increasingly complex global landscape.
Presented as essential for our national security interests, almost as a matter of patriotic duty.
And underpinning all of these points was the central idea of delivering on promises.
Back to the mandate.
The narrative was consistently clear. This bill, they argued, delivers precisely on what voters asked for, embodying the specific mandate given to the Republican Party in the November election.
We heard you, and this is it.
It was framed as a direct fulfillment of their campaign pledges, a testament to their commitment to their constituents.
Finally, economically speaking, they predicted a truly massive economic boost.
More than just the tax cuts.
Oh, yeah. Supporters went so far as to say the bill would turbocharge the entire economy and lead to an unprecedented investment surge with the potential to raise real median incomes by an impressive $10,000.
$10,000. Wow.
It painted a picture of widespread prosperity in a new golden age of America, where businesses would flourish, jobs would be created, and the average family would see their financial well-being dramatically improve. A very optimistic outlook.
It really was.
What's striking, really, is how strategically these arguments are crafted to appeal to a specific voter base, linking directly to campaign promises.
Yeah, it's very targeted messaging.
It almost makes you wonder, if you were a lawmaker pitching this, which of these benefits, the tax cuts, fiscal responsibility, or even that America First angle, would you prioritize for your community?
Good question.
Given how deeply it ties into what voters supposedly asked for, it's a powerful lesson in how political narratives are constructed and tailored.
Now let's flip the coin and consider the other side, those who fiercely opposed H.R. 1.
The one big ugly bill crowd.
They often refer to it as the one big ugly bill, or, as we heard earlier, even a steaming pile of crap.
Yeah, no holding back there.
Their arguments were equally, if not more, passionate, painting a very different and frankly much darker picture of the bill's potential impact. The contrast couldn't be starker.
Indeed. Opponents describe this bill as nothing less than the biggest attack on our social safety net in decades.
Decades, that's serious.
Their dire warning was that it would lead to millions suffering, losing critical services, and potentially even dying. This was their primary, most emotionally charged, and frequently repeated concern.
Framing it as an assault on the vulnerable.
A direct assault, yes.
And they really hammered home the potential devastating effects on Medicaid, didn't they? It seemed to be at the core of their entire opposition.
Absolutely. That was ground zero for the opposition. They alleged it would put an astonishing 16 to 17 million people at direct risk of losing their health insurance.
16 to 17 million.
That's the number they used.
Yeah.
Emphatically calling it the largest cut to Medicaid in American history.
Wow.
The congressional record on this is particularly powerful, filled with deeply personal stories from constituents from across the country.
Real people, real stories.
Exactly. We heard from parents caring for severely disabled children who rely on Medicaid for essential surgeries and medications. Like Lisa with her 43-year-old nonverbal autistic daughter, where Medicaid is literally life-sustaining. Others, like Garrett, diagnosed with cerebral palsy, whose mobility was dramatically improved by Medicaid-funded surgeries. Or Daniela, whose 5-year-old daughter with a heart condition, for whom Medicaid is the only way to afford doctor's visits and medications. They voice fears of losing vital care.
These are gut-wrenching stories.
They are. Similar stories came from Martha in Florida, whose adult daughter with developmental disabilities depends on Medicaid. Single mothers, like Kim from Indiana, described SNAP and Medicaid as lifelines for her children, often with too little food.
Just basic survival.
We heard from Patrick, an RN in Iowa, whose 2 disabled children rely on Medicaid for extensive therapies and independent living. And William, a 57-year-old from Minnesota, who is diabetic and legally blind, relying on Medicaid, Medicare, and SNAP for food and living expenses.
People depending on multiple programs.
Yes. Finally, Sharon's daughter, a young woman with cerebral palsy, cognitive impairments, and autism, was described as totally at risk without Medicaid services.
So the human cost was front and center for opponents.
Absolutely. These aren't just statistics. They are vivid human stories used to illustrate the potential devastation of these proposed cuts.
And on those work requirements for Medicaid, which supporters touted as a way to promote independence, opponents countered sharply, calling them a smokescreen. What was their reasoning there?
Well, their argument was that these requirements weren't really about getting people jobs, but simply about pushing people off the rolls, making it harder to stay covered.
Just another barrier.
That's how they saw it. They cited statistics arguing that over 90% of Medicaid recipients who can work do work already.
Oh, really? So the target group is small.
According to them, yes. So these requirements, they claimed, aren't about encouraging employment, but rather about erecting barriers to essential services, effectively kicking vulnerable people off a critical safety net under the guise of promoting self-sufficiency.
Framing it as punitive.
It frames the debate as one of compassion versus what they saw as punitive measures.
Beyond individual recipients, they also warned of a broader collapse of healthcare facilities. What kind of impact were they predicting there?
Their predictions were dire. Rural hospitals shutting down.
Rural hospitals are already struggling.
Exactly. Potentially 1 in 4 nursing homes closing their doors, and numerous community health centers vanishing from communities.
Wow. 1 in 4 nursing homes.
That was the claim. The concern was that this would impact everyone, regardless of their Medicaid status, as critical access points for care would simply disappear.
Creating healthcare deserts.
Especially in underserved areas. It would fundamentally weaken the entire healthcare infrastructure, they argued.
Then there was SNA, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food assistance.
Right. Opponents argue that 42 million Americans could be at risk of losing these vital food benefits.
42 million. That's huge.
Huge number. Forcing states to either cut essential programs or raise taxes to compensate. This would, as they put it, take food off kitchen tables.
Direct impact on hunger.
And affect millions, including veterans, seniors, and children. The consequences of these cuts, they asserted, would be felt in every community, increasing hunger and food insecurity for the most vulnerable.
Shifting to the economy, despite the supporters' claims of fiscal sanity,
The opponents had a very different take.
they vehemently argued the bill would do the exact opposite, adding over $3 trillion to the national debt.
$3 trillion added versus the $2 trillion cut claimed by supporters. Big difference.
This, they contended, meant grandkids will fund a tax cut for Elon Musk. That's a memorable line.
Very memorable. They sharply questioned the notion of fiscal responsibility when, in their view, billionaires and large corporations apparently get massive tax breaks while working families and those in need receive what they described as scraps.
So, a fairness argument.
A direct challenge to the fairness and equity of the bill's economic impacts.
And the financial pain, they argue, wouldn't stop there. They claimed the bill would lead to increased costs for everyday Americans.
Right, not just taxes, but other costs too.
Specifically, spiking utility bills and increasing energy costs by hundreds of dollars annually.
Oh.
This was attributed to what they called an all-out and unnecessary assault on clean energy tax credits, despite some Republicans previously pledging support for such initiatives.
So, accusing them of flipping on clean energy.
Exactly. It highlighted a perceived hypocrisy and a direct threat to household budgets.
On immigration concerns, opponents unleashed fierce criticism,
This sounds intense.
accusing the bill of militarizing our entire economy by allocating billions to DHS and ICE.
Billions more for immigration enforcement.
This funding, they claimed, would lead to dangerous sweeps and the expansion of illegal detention centers. They cited specific, harrowing examples to underscore their point.
Like what?
A 2-year-old American citizen, VML, separated from her undocumented mother who had no criminal history.
Oh, man.
And Carrie Lopez Alvarado, a 9-month pregnant U.S. citizen, arrested without clear justification, according to them.
Pregnant U.S. citizen arrested.
That was the allegation. They directly questioned the targeting of law-abiding immigrant families like Narciso Barranco, an undocumented landscaper who raised 3 U.S. Marine sons.
Wow. 3 Marines.
Contrasting it with the stated goal of targeting violent felons. They also highlighted what they claimed were FEMA funds, allegedly diverted from disaster recovery efforts to build an inhumane new prison for migrants in Florida.
FEMA money for a migrant prison. That's a strong claim.
An allegation that provoked considerable outrage, yeah.
Finally, there were sharp process criticisms how the bill was handled.
Right, not just the substance, but the procedure.
Democrats accused Republicans of trying to jam this bill down the throats of the American people,
Jamming it through.
attributing the apparent rush to President Trump's desire for a bill to be finalized by the 4th of July.
The deadline pressure.
They also strongly criticized the allocation of only 15 minutes of debate time to major committees like Ways and Means and Budget for a bill of this immense scale.
15 minutes. For a bill this big.
That's what they claimed. They argued it would have devastating, far-reaching consequences without proper deliberation. This was a direct attack on the integrity of the legislative process itself.
Given these starkly contrasting views, hosts, and the very different narratives they constructed,
Yeah.
how do you think lawmakers decide which stories, which facts, or which potential impacts to emphasize when they talk about a bill like this to their constituents and the public?
Oh, that's such a critical question.
It's a powerful lesson in how political narratives are constructed and deployed to shape public opinion.
Well, I mean, it seems like each side selects the facts and anecdotes that best support their pre-existing ideological framework, right?
Uh-huh. Reinforce their worldview.
They often amplify emotional appeals or dire warnings to rally support or opposition. They highlight what they believe will resonate most deeply with their base and undecided voters,
And maybe downplay the rest.
and minimize or omit information that complicates their narrative. It's not just about conveying information, it's about shaping a perception of reality. It's the art of political communication. Hashtag #Tutu, deeper dive into key policy changes in H.R. 1.
All right, let's shift our focus now and dig into some of the highly specific policy changes proposed in H.R. 1.
Okay, getting into the weeds.
We're starting with money matters.
Right.
How this bill aimed to directly change what you pay in taxes and what you might be able to save or deduct.
Your wallet.
Exactly. These aren't just abstract numbers. They have real-world implications for your wallet.
This is where it gets really interesting because the bill touches on so many granular aspects of personal finance. What were some of the most eye-opening proposed changes related to taxes and personal income that caught your attention in the record?
One that immediately jumps out is a new provision for tax on tips and overtime.
Oh, tips and overtime. How would that work?
This bill proposes to exclude qualified tips. Specifically, cash tips from jobs that customarily receive tips before December 31st, 2024, up to a generous $25,000 annually from your gross income.
So tax-free tips up to a limit?
Up to $25K, yeah. This means you wouldn't pay federal income tax on that portion of your tips. The bill also includes a similar exclusion for qualified overtime compensation up to $7,500.
$7.5 grand for overtime, tax-free.
That's the proposal. For workers in the service industry or those who frequently work overtime, this could translate into a noticeable increase in their take-home pay.
Big deal for them.
It's a direct financial benefit intended to put more money into the pockets of a specific segment of the workforce.
That's a significant direct financial benefit for many. I can imagine that being a huge talking point for supporters. What about car owners and their loans? There was a mention of changes to car loan interest.
Indeed. Another interesting tax change concerns car loan interest. For the years 2025 through 2028, interest paid on loans for qualified passenger vehicles could be excluded from personal interest deductions.
So you could deduct your car loan interest. Usually you can't, right?
Usually you can't. For personal vehicles, no.
Right.
Now, it's important to clarify what qualified means here. This exclusion isn't for fleet sales, commercial vehicles, leases, or salvage titles.
Just regular personal cars.
Right, specifically for personal use vehicles. And here's a pretty granular detail that highlights how precise these tax changes can be. To claim this exclusion, you would need to include the Vehicle Identification Number, or VIN, directly on your tax return.
Gotta check the VIN. Okay.
This could offer a modest tax break for new car buyers, incentivizing personal vehicle ownership, though perhaps not a game changer for most families.
Then we hit a particularly intriguing and, frankly, somewhat mysterious provision that the bill calls Trump accounts.
Ah, yes, the Trump accounts.
Now, this isn't just another tax-advantaged savings plan. It appears to be a completely new philosophical approach to long-term savings, particularly for minors. Can you break down what these accounts are and, more importantly, why they've been dubbed Trump accounts in the legislation?
Absolutely. The name itself signals a strong connection to a specific economic vision, doesn't it?
Definitely stands out.
These Trump accounts are a novel savings vehicle designed with some very distinct characteristics. Generally, and this is key, you wouldn't be able to deduct contributions made to these accounts until the beneficiary that's the child or young person the account is for, turns 18.
So deduction is delayed until adulthood.
Right. And similarly, you couldn't withdraw funds before they turn 18, though there would be specific, narrowly defined exceptions, likely for things like medical emergencies or critical educational needs.
So the money is locked up for a long time.
Essentially locked away for a considerable period, encouraging long-term intergenerational wealth building. That seems to be the idea. But what's particularly fascinating, and where the Trump moniker likely originates, is the provision allowing for general funding contributions from certain organizations to specified classes of beneficiaries.
General funding contributions. From who?
It's a bit vague in the summary, but it hints at a potential pathway for broader philanthropic, communal, or even governmental support to be channeled into these accounts.
Aiming to foster financial stability from a young age.
That seems to be the goal, potentially targeting specific demographics or communities. Critics might argue it's primarily a tax benefit for wealthier families who can afford to lock away funds for years without needing immediate access.
While proponents would say?
Proponents would counter that it creates a long-term foundation for future generations, especially if those general funding contributions materialize for lower-income families.
So different from a 529 plan.
Very different model from, say, a 529 college savings plan. It offers more flexibility in terms of how the funds can eventually be used, but with much stricter early access rules designed to ensure long-term savings. It really encapsulates a different philosophy about how we encourage savings and wealth accumulation for the next generation.
Moving to student finances, the bill includes provisions for student loan forgiveness. This sounds like a potential relief for many, but what exactly does it propose?
This is a significant one for student loan holders. If certain student loans are discharged, meaning you don't have to pay them back, due to specific federal programs.
Which programs?
The record doesn't specify exactly which ones, just certain federal programs. But if they are discharged under those programs, the bill proposes that these discharged amounts would be excluded from your taxable income.
Ah, so no tax bomb on forgiveness.
Exactly. This is a critical change because typically, when debt is forgiven, that forgiven amount can be considered taxable income by the IRS, essentially creating a new tax bill for the borrower.
This nobody wants.
Right. So this provision could be a substantial financial benefit for those who qualify for these specific federal loan forgiveness programs, preventing them from facing an unexpected tax burden on debt they no longer owe.
And for families, the bill makes some notable changes to the child tax credit. This credit has been a major support for many households already, so how does this bill propose to alter it?
It does. The bill proposes extending and increasing the child tax credit.
Extending and increasing.
Yes, which could directly mean more money for families with children. To claim it, your Social Security number would be required for the child.
Need the SSN.
Okay. This is a continuation and expansion of a credit that has already been a major support for many households, aimed at easing the financial burden of raising children and boosting family incomes. It reflects a continued commitment to direct financial support for families.
Alongside the child tax credit, there are proposed enhancements to child care and dependent care credits. How would these help working parents?
These are designed to directly ease the financial burden of childcare, which is huge for so many families.
Tell me about it.
The credit for employer-provided childcare would be increased to 40%, or even a higher 50% for small businesses.
Encouraging businesses to offer childcare help.
Exactly, with higher maximum credit amounts too. This incentivizes businesses to offer or subsidize childcare for their employees. Additionally, there are adjustments to the child and dependent care credit, which directly helps families offset the costs of childcare they pay themselves.
So help from employers and directly to families.
Right. These changes signal a focus on easing the financial burden of childcare for working parents and supporting businesses that help their employees with these costs, aiming to improve workforce participation and financial stability for families.
Here's where it gets really interesting for education outside of traditional higher education. The bill introduces provisions for new scholarships. This sounds like a significant expansion, doesn't it?
It's a very notable shift in how scholarship funds are treated, and it expands the scope of what types of educational expenses can be covered tax-free.
Okay, what kind of scholarships?
Specifically, amounts received from scholarships for K-12 elementary or secondary education expenses would be excluded from your gross income if provided by a scholarship granting organization.
K-12 scholarships, tax-free. For private school tuition.
Could be tuition, yes. And this isn't just tuition and fees. It broadly includes books, supplies, uniforms, tutoring, transportation,
Wow, broad range.
and crucially, even educational therapies for students with disabilities.
Okay, that's significant.
This is a significant expansion of what kind of education costs can be covered tax-free, potentially making private K-12 education, homeschooling resources, or specialized support services more financially accessible for many families. It clearly aims to broaden educational choice beyond just public schools, using the tax code as an incentive.
So, thinking about all these granular changes, expert, if you could get a tax break for something you do or use that isn't currently covered, what would you choose and why?
Oh, that's a fun one.
It really highlights the breadth of this bill's potential financial effects and how personal tax policy can be.
That's a great thought experiment. I think if I could choose, I'd want a tax break for continued adult education and upskilling courses, even outside of a traditional degree program.
Lifelong learning kind of thing.
Exactly. In a rapidly changing economy, the ability to continually learn and adapt new skills is paramount, right?
If so,
Easing that financial burden could incentivize lifelong learning and career agility for everyone, not just those pursuing formal degrees. It connects directly to personal relevance, just like these provisions in the bill connect to the lives of the waitresses, linemen, and families we've discussed.
okay, let's talk about health and well-being now.
Right, the big one, Medicaid.
Because Medicaid, which provides vital health care to millions of low-income Americans, is a major focus of this bill. The proposed changes here are quite significant and, as we heard earlier, highly contentious.
Yeah, significant might be an understatement. These are potentially massive shifts.
They certainly are significant. From the sounds of it, these aren't just minor adjustments, they represent a fundamental reimagining of Medicaid. How do these proposed changes compare to previous attempts at healthcare reform, and what's the potential for resistance beyond just these vocal opponents?
That's a critical point because these changes do indeed represent a fundamental shift. They hark back to, and in some ways exceed, past conservative proposals for reforming Medicaid.
Okay, like what?
Well, one key provision is a moratorium on certain enrollment rules. The bill explicitly puts a pause, specifically until September 30, 2034.
2034, that's a long pause.
A decade, basically.
Yeah.
It pauses the implementation of new federal rules for Medicare savings programs that were designed to streamline eligibility.
So making it easier to sign up is on hold.
Efforts to simplify how people qualify for certain Medicare cost assistance programs are effectively put on hold. For state administrators, it means they can't implement planned efficiencies. For beneficiaries, it could mean continued complexity in accessing these programs that help cover Medicare premiums and out-of-pocket costs.
And what about accountability and reducing potential fraud? There were mentions of more robust data sharing for eligibility within the bill.
Yes, that's clearly a priority. States will now be required to regularly obtain up-to-date address information for all Medicaid enrollees.
Keep the lists clean.
And they'll also have to exchange information monthly with other states to cross-check if individuals are enrolled in Medicaid in multiple states.
Catching double dipping.
Right, designed to prevent duplicate coverage and fraud. Critically, the bill mandates the use of the Death Master file, a database of deceased individuals to identify those who have passed away.
Makes sense.
But also, if someone is mistakenly removed from Medicaid based on that information, the state must immediately re-enroll them. So there's a safeguard for errors.
Good.
This is clearly aimed at ensuring accurate recipient lists and preventing improper payments, while also having a safeguard for errors.
Adding to that, the bill introduces more frequent eligibility checks. This sounds like it could create more hurdles for recipients.
It could, yeah. Starting after December 31st, 2026, states would have to redetermine eligibility for certain individuals every 6 months.
Every 6 months, instead of annually.
Right, instead of the typical annual practice.
Yeah.
While supporters might argue this ensures only eligible individuals receive benefits, critics contend it could create a more frequent administrative burden for both states and beneficiaries.
More paperwork, more chances to fall through the cracks.
Exactly. It increases the likelihood that eligible people could lose coverage due to paperwork issues or missing deadlines, even if their circumstances haven't changed.
Now, this is the really big one that sparked so much of the debate we heard. Community engagement, often referred to as work requirements. Can you break down what this truly means and who it applies to?
This indeed was a flashpoint. For applicable individuals generally, adults in certain Medicaid categories, states can require them to engage in community engagement.
States can require it, so it's optional for states.
The bill gives states the option, yes. And community engagement is broadly defined. It includes a range of activities, working, actively looking for a job, participating in education or job training, doing community service,
Okay, quite a few options.
or even receiving treatment for substance use. The idea, proponents say, is to incentivize self-sufficiency and connect recipients with resources that could lead to employment.
But there are crucial exceptions to these requirements, aren't there? Who would be exempt from having to meet these work requirements?
Yes, and these exceptions are important to understand. Individuals under 19 or over 65 years of age are exempt.
Okay, kids and seniors.
Those with disabilities, pregnant individuals, caregivers, which is a very broad category.
Caregivers could be a big group.
Potentially, yes. Or those already receiving Medicare or who are inmates. They would not have to meet these work requirements.
But if you're not exempt and don't comply,
Then you could lose your Medicaid coverage. States are also explicitly mandated to send outreach notices about these rules, informing people how to comply or how to reapply if they lose coverage.
and there's funding to help states do this.
Yes, the bill allocates $100 million in grants to help states implement this, plus another $200 million for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, to carry out the provisions. It indicates a significant federal push for these new requirements.
An interesting detail within the work requirements is a prohibition on conflicts of interest. What's the thinking behind that particular safeguard?
This is a crucial ethical safeguard, it seems like. States are explicitly prohibited from using certain contractors to determine compliance with these new community engagement rules if those contractors have a direct or indirect financial relationship with the managed care entities.
The insurance companies providing Medicaid services.
Exactly, the ones that provide services to Medicaid enrollees. The concern is that a contractor with a financial incentive tied to managed care could potentially gain from reducing the number of enrollees.
Ah, a perverse incentive.
Right, creating a perverse incentive. This provision aims to prevent such conflicts and ensure compliance decisions are made impartially.
Another change, starting October 1st, 2028, impacts cost sharing for some Medicaid expansion individuals. What does that mean for their out-of-pocket expenses?
This is a significant shift for a group that often faces very limited out-of-pocket costs currently.
The ACA expansion population.
Generally, yes. While these individuals might not be charged premiums, states can allow providers to require payment for services through deductions or cost sharing up to 5% of a family's income on a quarterly or monthly basis.
5% of income could still be a lot for low-income families.
It could. This could mean new out-of-pocket costs for a population that previously had very limited or no cost sharing for their healthcare services, potentially making it harder for some to access care despite still having coverage.
The bill also includes a provision for support for rural health. This sounds like a positive development amidst all these contentious changes.
It is, and it seems like a direct response to a critical need. The bill appropriates $50 million per fiscal year from 2026 through 2033 for grants to states specifically to improve healthcare in rural areas.
$50 million a year for rural health.
And significantly, no matching funds are required from the states, which makes these grants particularly attractive for cash-strapped rural governments.
That's key. No state match needed.
Right. This aims to prioritize new technologies, strengthen partnerships between rural providers, and enhance the recruitment and retention of healthcare workers in underserved areas, aiming to bolster healthcare access for millions who live outside major metropolitan centers.
Finally, in a different part of the social safety net, the bill introduces a new rule for unemployment benefits for high earners. What's the idea behind this?
This provision aims to ensure that unemployment benefits are truly targeted to those in need, rather than very high-income individuals.
Like millionaires getting unemployment.
Essentially, yeah.
Huh.
The new rule requires individuals applying for unemployment benefits to certify that their wages in their base period didn't equal or exceed $1 million threshold.
States will also need to verify this income. It's a measure to prevent or at least identify what some might see as an inappropriate use of a system designed for those who have lost their primary means of income and require essential assistance. So how might these wide-ranging changes to Medicaid and unemployment benefits impact families, or people in your community? These are not minor tweaks. They represent a fundamental reshaping of how this critical safety net operates.
That's the core question, isn't it?
The impact could be profound.
For many families, especially those balancing tight budgets or caring for vulnerable loved ones, these changes could mean the difference between getting essential care and facing overwhelming medical debt or a complete loss of access.
The stakes are incredibly high.
The increased eligibility checks and work requirements could create significant administrative burdens, potentially leading to people falling through the cracks, even if they're technically eligible. While the rural health funding is a positive, the overall direction signals a clear shift towards more restrictive access for some,
Which could mean.
which for many families could translate directly into difficult choices between food, housing, and healthcare. It truly shifts the landscape of public health support.
Okay, let's explore a section of the bill that marks a pretty significant shift in national priorities: energy and environmental policies.
Right, energy. H.R. 1 proposes substantial changes, particularly concerning fossil fuels and clean energy initiatives, reflecting a clear ideological direction.
That's right. The bill includes provisions that are clearly aimed at boosting oil, gas, and coal production. It really seems to roll back some of the recent efforts to transition towards green energy.
It absolutely does. The bill explicitly repeals several key provisions from a previous law, the Inflation Reduction Act.
Ah, the IRA, repealing parts of it?
Yes, provisions which had aimed to increase costs for oil and gas production through various fees and taxes. This repeal is a direct move to lower the financial burden on fossil fuel producers.
Making it cheaper to produce fossil fuels.
Right. Furthermore, it mandates that the Secretary of the Interior conduct a minimum of 4 oil and gas lease sales annually in specific states, including Wyoming, New Mexico, and Alaska.
Mandating lease sales.
Yeah, forcing them to happen. To further incentivize production, it significantly reduces royalty rates on oil, gas, and coal extracted from public lands.
Lowering the government's take.
Exactly. Supporters argue these measures will lead to more domestic production, enhance energy independence, and crucially, lower gas and electricity costs for consumers.
Connecting back to the affordability argument.
Linking directly back to those tax cut arguments we heard earlier. Beyond that, the bill also invests in crucial water resource infrastructure and supports forest management, areas often tied to natural resource development and resource extraction.
So, if that's boosting fossil fuels, what does it mean for the other side of the coin, wind and solar? There were notable changes for wind and solar projects as well.
On the flip side, the bill introduces significant new fees for wind and solar projects located on public lands.
New fees on renewables.
Well, this isn't just a minor administrative change. It marks a distinct shift in how renewable energy projects are incentivized or perhaps disincentivized.
How do the fees work?
These new fees include an acreage rent for the land occupied by these projects and a fee equivalent to 3.9% of the gross proceeds from electricity sales generated by these projects.
3.9% of revenue plus rent.
Right. While there's a multiple use reduction factor that could slightly reduce fees by 10% for wind projects, the core idea is that these projects, like traditional energy ventures, should contribute directly to public coffers through these new charges.
Treating renewables more like fossil fuels in terms of fees.
That seems to be the approach. The revenues generated from these projects would then be split. 25% to the county where the project's located, 25% to the state, and the remaining 50% to the U.S. Treasury.
Okay, so the money goes back to local areas and the feds.
This could be seen as shifting the financial burden or benefit of renewable energy projects more directly to local and federal governments, moving away from a model that primarily relied on federal tax credits.
And here's where the green energy discussion really gets impacted. The bill includes explicit cuts to green funding, directly taking back money from prior initiatives. What does that signal?
It signals a very clear and intentional pivot away from certain past green energy initiatives and investments.
Taking back money already allocated.
Exactly. The bill rescinds or takes back unobligated balances, meaning funds that were previously appropriated by Congress but haven't yet been spent or committed.
Which programs are getting cut?
It's a wide range of clean energy initiatives. Funding for clean heavy-duty vehicles, a major portion of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, diesel emissions reductions programs, clean energy enforcement technology.
Wow, quite a list.
Requirements for greenhouse gas corporate reporting, environmental product declarations, and even methane emissions reduction programs. This broad suite of rescissions makes it clear that the intent is to redirect or reduce federal support for these specific green technologies and regulations.
Aligning with the broader strategy to favor traditional energy sources.
Seems like it.
What's particularly fascinating here is the introduction of restrictions on foreign entities in clean energy development. This sounds like it ties into national security concerns, not just environmental policy.
You're absolutely right. This is where energy policy intersects directly with national security and economic protection.
How so?
The bill sets very specific new rules that could deny tax credits for zero-emission nuclear power, clean electricity production, and advanced manufacturing of clean energy components.
Denying tax credits
if there's material assistance from a prohibited foreign entity.
prohibited foreign entity, like China or Russia.
Exactly. This term is very carefully defined in the bill and includes entities controlled by or influenced by covered nations like China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea,
The usual suspects.
or entities that don't meet specific beneficial ownership reporting rules, which, for our listeners, means rules ensuring transparency about who ultimately owns and controls a company.
Okay, transparency rules too.
The bill even sets threshold percentages for how much material assistance from such entities is allowed, starting at 40% in 2026 and increasing over time.
So tightening the screws over time.
It seems so. This is clearly a move to reduce reliance on adversarial nations for critical clean energy supply chains, aiming to bring manufacturing and intellectual property back home and reduce strategic vulnerabilities.
A national security angle on green tech.
It reflects a growing concern about geopolitical competition in the green technology sector.
And to underscore this strategic shift, the bill legislates the termination of some clean energy credits earlier than originally planned. This isn't just a cut, it's a hard stop for certain programs.
Exactly. It's a definitive end for several tax credits designed to incentivize specific clean energy technologies.
Which ones are ending early?
For example, the clean hydrogen production credit would now terminate on January 1st, 2028, instead of its original end date of 2033.
Hydrogen credit cut short by 5 years.
The advanced manufacturing production credit would phase out for critical minerals by 2034 and completely terminate for wind energy components after 2027 and for metallurgical coal after 2029.
Wind component manufacturing credit ending soon.
Even the sustainable aviation fuel credit would terminate earlier, on September 30, 2025.
Sustainable jet fuel. That's ending very soon.
Very soon. These accelerated terminations reflect a broader intent to redirect or significantly reduce federal support for these specific clean energy technologies, signaling a fundamental change in the nation's energy investment strategy and likely impacting the growth trajectory of these sectors.
How do you think these significant energy changes, boosting fossil fuels, adding fees to renewables, cutting green funding, and restricting foreign involvement, might affect the types of jobs available in the future, especially in your community?
Oh, that's huge.
Think about the ripple effects on different industries and local economies.
That's a crucial economic question for every community. For areas heavily reliant on fossil fuel industries, these changes could mean job security and even growth, perhaps revitalizing mining towns or oil and gas regions.
Good news for them, potentially.
Potentially. However, for communities that have been investing heavily in renewable energy infrastructure or clean tech manufacturing, these shifts could lead to job losses or a slowdown in new investment.
Bad news for green jobs.
It means a potential reallocation of economic opportunities across different sectors and geographies. The impact would certainly not be uniform across the country. Let's move now to another critical area that H.R. 1 addresses: keeping us safe.
Defense, border, justice.
Right. This bill includes substantial appropriations and policy changes related to national defense, border security, and justice systems, reflecting a broad, robust approach to homeland security.
Absolutely. When it comes to military spending, the bill allocates significant new funds. These aren't just general budget increases, they're very specific investments in advanced capabilities.
That's right. We're talking about substantial investments aimed at modernizing and enhancing military capabilities.
What kind of hardware?
The bill earmarks $250 million for production capacity expansion for long-range, multi-service cruise missiles,
More cruise missiles.
aiming to bolster offensive and defensive capabilities. Another $70 million is designated for the development and integration of short-range Navy and Marine Corps anti-ship missiles,
Ship killers, okay.
crucial for naval dominance. A significant $400 million is allocated for accelerating hypersonic strike programs,
Hypersonics. Big focus there.
a cutting-edge area of military technology. There's also $500 million earmarked for expanding defense advanced manufacturing techniques, supporting innovation in military production,
Making weapons faster, maybe cheaper.
potentially, and a full $1 billion for the Defense Production Act, which is crucial for securing critical supplies and materials for national defense industries.
DPA getting $1 billion? That's serious.
On top of that, funds are included to improve the Department of Defense's overall efficiency and cybersecurity, recognizing that modern warfare extends to the digital realm. These are major investments, clearly signaling a commitment to military strength and technological superiority.
This raises an important question. How do you think government spending on military technology or border security might affect other areas of the budget, like education or healthcare.
The classic guns versus butter debate.
It's a constant balancing act in federal budgeting, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it's a fundamental challenge for lawmakers. When you allocate substantial new funds, particularly billions of dollars, to one sector, like defense or border security,
Yeah.
it often means those funds are either diverted from other potential areas of investment like education, scientific research, or social programs, or they contribute to increasing the national debt,
Or both.
or both. It forces a trade-off. Do we prioritize external security and border control, or do we prioritize internal social well-being and future human capital development? The bill, by prioritizing these specific areas, implicitly makes a statement about those trade-offs.
Next, border security enhancements are a major focus, and this seems to go beyond just funding personnel.
Indeed, the bill dedicates significant funds for new or improved physical barriers, often referred to as walls, along the U.S. border.
More wall funding.
But it's not just about physical structures. It also allocates funds for access roads, essential for patrol and maintenance, and for advanced technology like cameras, lights, and sensors,
Tech for the border, too.
creating a multi-layered security approach. It also provides substantial funding for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP personnel, fleet vehicles, and facilities, bolstering the operational capacity of border enforcement.
More agents, more trucks, better buildings.
Right. The bill explicitly defines family residential centers as facilities used by the Department of Homeland Security to detain alien family units, clarifying their legal status.
Defining those centers.
Furthermore, it provides grants to state and local governments for border security activities conducted since January 2021,
Paying states back for border stuff they already did.
showing a retroactive support for certain initiatives that have already been underway, effectively reimbursing them for their efforts. This package reflects a comprehensive strategy to enhance border control.
Beyond physical infrastructure and personnel, the bill introduces new immigration fees. How will this impact individuals going through immigration processes?
This is a significant change to the cost structure for certain immigration processes. Specifically, new fees are established for various immigration applications, starting at $550 in fiscal year 2025.
$550 fee to apply. For what applications?
The summary says various, so likely multiple types, and these fees will be adjusted annually with inflation. Importantly, these fees generally cannot be waived or reduced.
No waivers. That could be tough for some.
Could represent a substantial financial hurdle for many applicants. There's also a new fee required for aliens paroled into the United States,
People granted parole entry.
with specific exceptions for children, organ donors, or those with family members facing imminent death. These fees are designed to offset the costs of immigration services, but critics argue they could create a financial barrier to legal immigration and asylum.
In terms of justice and public safety, the bill funnels funding to various law enforcement and judicial agencies. What are some of the key allocations here?
The bill includes significant funding for the Department of Justice to hire attorneys for litigation and support, aiming to bolster the federal legal system.
More DOJ lawyers.
It also supports well-known programs like the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program,
Burn, JAG, grants, local cops use those.
right, which provides flexible funding to state and local law enforcement agencies for a wide range of activities, and the Office of Community-Oriented Policing, both of which provide crucial funding to state and local law enforcement agencies across the country for everything from equipment to community engagement programs.
COPS grants, too.
The State Criminal Alien Assistance Program, SCAP, also receives grants to compensate states and local governments for incarcerating undocumented criminal aliens,
Paying local jails for holding immigrants.
providing federal reimbursement for those costs. And interestingly, to help retain and attract talent in a critical agency, the Secret Service is authorized to provide retention bonuses.
Bonuses for Secret Service.
Yes, for 2 years of additional service, and signing bonuses for 5 years of service to agents, officers, and analysts, recognizing the high demands and specialized skills required for their work.
Trying to keep agents from leaving.
Seems like it.
Finally, a notable update to the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, or RECA. This is a critical program for a specific group of Americans.
Yes, RECA, compensating people affected by radiation.
Yes, and it's an expansion of a program designed to provide compensation for health issues linked to specific historical events. What are the key changes here?
This bill expands eligibility for compensation for certain diseases related to radiation exposure from specific historical nuclear tests, like the infamous Trinity test in New Mexico,
The first atomic bomb test?
and from uranium mining operations. It notably adds core driller and those involved in remediation efforts at uranium mines and mills to the list of covered workers,
Expanding who qualifies as a uranium worker.
acknowledging more roles that put individuals at risk. Crucially, it includes chronic renal disease, which is kidney disease, as a covered illness for uranium workers,
Kidney disease added to the list.
expanding the range of conditions for which compensation can be claimed. The deadline for submitting medical expense claims is extended to December 31st, 2028,
More time to file claims.
giving more time for potential claimants to come forward. And it specifies affected areas by ZIP code in Missouri, Tennessee, and Alaska that now qualify for claims,
Adding new geographic areas.
significantly broadening the geographic scope of coverage for those impacted by historical radiation exposure. This is a clear effort to provide justice and support to individuals and families affected by these historical incidents. Transitioning now to the future, the bill also includes significant changes that directly affect students and education,
Okay, education and skills.
from how student loans work to how scholarships are treated, signaling a clear shift in educational priorities and how we invest in human capital.
Yes, there are some big shifts coming for student loans, particularly for graduate students. What's changing there?
This is a substantial change for graduate and professional students. For graduate PLUS loans,
The grad PLUS loans, yeah.
which have historically provided interest-subsidized loans to graduate and professional students, the authority to make these specific subsidized loans will terminate on July 1st, 2026.
Terminate. So no more subsidized grad PLUS loans after 2026.
That's what it says. This means that after that date, graduate students will have fewer options for subsidized loans, potentially increasing their overall cost of borrowing for higher education,
Making grad school more expensive.
as they would primarily rely on unsubsidized loans, which accrue interest while the student is still in school. It represents a shift in federal support for graduate-level education.
Additionally, the bill impacts repayment plans for new borrowers. What choices will students have for loans made after July 1st, 2026?
For loans made after July 1st, 2026, borrowers will generally have to choose between a standard repayment plan, which can range from 10 to 25 years, depending on the total outstanding principal, or an income-based repayment assistance plan.
Standard or income-based. That's it.
Seems like those are the main options presented here. A key detail is that if you don't actively choose a plan, the Secretary of Education will automatically pick the standard plan for you.
Default is the standard plan.
Right. This change streamlines, but also somewhat limits, the initial choices available to new borrowers and places the onus on the borrower to actively select an income-based option if that's what they prefer.
Here's where it could get particularly challenging for some. For loans made after July 1st, 2027, borrowers will no longer be eligible for unemployment or economic hardship deferments.
Wow, getting rid of those deferments.
What does that mean for someone facing unexpected financial difficulty?
This is a significant removal of a safety net. Unemployment or economic hardship deferments have traditionally allowed borrowers to temporarily pause their loan payments during periods of financial distress, like job loss or a sudden medical crisis.
A critical lifeline for many.
For loans made after July 1st, 2027, borrowers will no longer be able to utilize these options. This change could remove a crucial safety net for future borrowers facing unexpected economic challenges,
Could lead to more defaults.
potentially leading to higher rates of default or greater financial strain during difficult times. It forces a different kind of financial planning for students entering repayment.
Now let's turn to Pell Grant updates. These are foundational grants for many students. First, there's a change related to foreign income.
Yes, the definition of adjusted gross income for dependent students will now include foreign income when determining Pell Grant eligibility.
So, if your parents earn money overseas, it counts towards Pell eligibility.
Exactly. This means that any income earned abroad by a dependent student's family will now be factored into the financial aid calculation, potentially impacting eligibility or the amount of Pell Grant aid for some students whose families have foreign earnings. It's about ensuring a more comprehensive picture of a family's financial resources.
And this is a brand new concept introduced by the bill, the Workforce Pell Grant. This sounds like a significant shift in how Pell Grants are utilized.
It absolutely is. This new Workforce Pell Grant would be available for students in eligible workforce programs,
Like vocational training.
specifically vocational training programs, but notably not graduate programs. These programs need to lead to academic credit that can transfer to a related certificate or degree program.
Bridging vocational training and college credits.
Right, bridging that gap.
Hmm.
And crucially, they must meet certain programmatic median earnings benchmarks
Earnings benchmarks to make sure graduates get decent jobs.
to ensure that students completing these programs are actually getting good job opportunities and making a living wage, tying federal funding directly to demonstrable employment outcomes.
Accountability for job training programs.
Exactly. There's even an appeals process if a program doesn't meet those earnings benchmarks, indicating a focus on accountability and effectiveness. This marks a clear federal investment in vocational and skills-based training as a viable and valuable pathway to economic success.
Acknowledging different paths besides a 4-year degree.
Acknowledging the diverse needs of the modern workforce.
Given these changes, expert, how might these shifts in student loan provisions and the introduction of the Workforce Pell Grant impact someone deciding whether to go to a traditional 4-year college or a vocational training program after high school?
Oh, it could really change the calculation.
It could really change the landscape of post-secondary education for an individual, couldn't it?
It absolutely could. For someone weighing their options, these changes make the financial calculus very different. The reduced availability of subsidized graduate POUS loans and the loss of critical deferment options for future loans
Makes college look riskier.
might make a 4-year or graduate degree seem like a riskier, more expensive proposition for some. Conversely, the introduction of a workforce Pell Grant, with its focus on demonstrable earnings and a direct pathway to employment,
Makes vocational training more attractive.
could make vocational training programs significantly more attractive. It could shift perceived value and incentivize a more skills-based, immediately workforce-ready approach to post-secondary education for many students,
Creating potentially divergent paths.
potentially creating two distinct and increasingly divergent paths after high school.
And finally, a forward-looking provision that highlights the intersection of science and national strategy. The bill directs the Department of Energy to mobilize national laboratories to partner with industry.
DOE and national labs working with industry. On what?
Their mission is to organize scientific data so it's structured, cleaned, and pre-processed in a way that makes it suitable for use in artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning, ML models. Prepping data for AI research.
This isn't just about general research, it's about making sure our scientists have the highest quality data they need to build powerful AI tools for the future.
Connecting federal resources to AI development.
Explicitly linking federal resources to cutting-edge technological development. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. What an incredible deep dive into just a few days of activity in the House of Representatives.
Incredible's right. A lot packed into one bill.
We've seen how one major bill can truly touch so many different parts of our lives, from the food on your table and the taxes you pay, to how you fund your education, and even the future of our planet and national security.
Yeah, the reach is just astounding.
It truly is remarkable how interconnected these decisions are and how widely their effects can ripple.
Understanding these complex legislative debates isn't always easy, but as we've seen, it's absolutely crucial.
You really have to pay attention.
This congressional record reveals how lawmakers, representing very different ideas and deeply held values, argue fiercely over what they believe is the best path forward for our country.
Fierce arguments, definitely.
They grapple with profound trade-offs, weighing massive tax cuts against critical social programs and energy independence against environmental concerns. Every single line of that bill, every debated provision, represents a choice with real human implications.
It's a powerful reminder that every bill, every vote has real-world consequences for people across the country.
Real impacts on real lives.
And those consequences can be very different depending on who you are and where you live, illustrating the diverse and sometimes unequal impacts of national policy on individual lives and entire communities.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a political battle, it was a battle over the future direction of society.
Our aim throughout this deep dive has been to present both sides fairly, allowing you to hear the arguments as they were made in Congress,
Trying to stay neutral.
and to understand the factual basis for those arguments straight from the source material. We hope we've peeled back the layers and given you a clearer picture of the complexities involved.
So as you think about these debates and all the specific policies we've unpacked today, consider this. If you had the chance to speak directly to a lawmaker about one of these issues,
Yeah.
what would you want them to know about how these decisions affect your life and the lives of people you care about? What values would you want to see reflected in a bill like this?
It's a lot to process, isn't it? And it asks you to reflect not just on the facts, but on the principles and values behind them.
The why behind the what.
That critical reflection is truly the most important takeaway from understanding our legislative process.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the intricate workings of Congress. We hope you feel a little more informed and ready to critically reflect on the decisions being made on your behalf.